Hello and welcome to a new week. It's Tuesday and time for my devotional. Thanks for joining me. We're looking at Proverbs chapter 8, verse 3 today. We've been working our way through this. Chapter 8 of Proverbs is a chapter that focuses on the importance of recognizing wisdom as more than just simply how to make an efficient choice, but how to make good choices that are moral and godly. And so it's a really great and important chapter in the book. Once again, these first nine chapters of Proverbs are all valuable in themselves, but they all set the stage for the proverbial statements that come from chapter 10 through the rest of the book. So they're important foundational statements to understand the whole book. So here we are doing this, chapter 8, verse 3. I'm going to read it, and then I'll explain a little bit about something maybe we can take from it. So it says, "Beside the gates, at the opening to the city, at the entrance of the doors, she cries out." Now, that's just a verse. We're trying to focus on one verse, but you need context because who's she? What is this talking about? It's personifying wisdom. It's making this image of wisdom as if she were a woman calling out in these places. So it talks about the idea of like the chapter opens up with this rhetorical statement of, isn't it obvious that wisdom is calling us all, that we are drawn to want to make good decisions. And then in the second verse, it starts personifying wisdom as if she were, wisdom were a person, a woman calling to you. And it talks about being on the hill or beside the paths of your life, and the crossroads of your life, and so on. And then in verse 3, just carries that image forward and says that she, wisdom, calling to you, is beside the gates, at the opening to the city, at the entrance of the doors. So it's just three phrases. It's in a poetic way of just emphasizing this idea of going through the gates. And it says she cries out. So what are these gates? What are we talking about? Well, in the ancient world, the opening of a city, or the gates of a city, the entrance into a house, whatever, was very representative of the place where decisions were made, right? So whereas in verse 2, it talks about the path of life, the way you live, in the crossroads of life, that there are decisions to be made, of course, in which path you'll follow. The idea of gates or entrances of cities and houses and whatever is that this is a place where business was often done in the ancient world. It was the place where decisions could be made for the city, and often the government of a city was sort of referred to as the gates of such and such cities. So you could say the gates of Rome will be representative of the authority and the decision making powers of Rome, and so it was just that kind of idea, or Jerusalem or whatever. And so this is just drawing on this idea to say wisdom is at that place in your life as well. It's in the place of your life where you're making decisions about things, and you're deciding how you're going to do things. You're making treaties, or you're making business agreements, or you're just doing whatever. It's kind of the place where you decide what's going to come in and out of the city of your life, what's going to come in and out of the house of your life, or whatever. It's the place where you make that decision. So it's saying that wisdom is there in those moments, calling to you, saying, make wise decisions. And as we've been seeing throughout Proverbs, but as chapter 8 really makes clear, is that this is make godly decisions, make decisions that are moral and good decisions, and that's what wisdom is. The process of people making decisions is a very interesting thing, and there's entire disciplines on this idea, but disciplines of study on this idea. But for our purposes today, let's just consider for a second how so many people make decisions in our world. Most of the decisions that are made, most decisions in everyone's life, no matter how smart you are, most of the decisions we make are at an instinctual level. And by that, I simply mean it's not something that you really think about. It's something you just feel. Then that's not what instinctual purely means, of course, but the idea there is that we call it instinctual. It's just this idea that I made a decision without thinking. We went with my gut. I went with just what seemed right, what seemed natural. And the vast majority of decisions you make in any given day are actually instinctual. You don't scratch your nose thoughtfully. You just do, right? There's an itch, you scratch it, and that's that. And that's what we might call an instinctual kind of a thought process. Basically, not really a thought process at all. Now, true instinctual, of course, is I guess probably at the level of sort of some built-in decision, like a reflex action. So when we say instinctual, we also mean things like things we've learned, we've scripted, or we've learned in our life, like just behaviors we've just sort of adopted. At some point in time, maybe we did think about those behaviors, but they've just become habitual now and routine to us. And so we just do those things without thinking. We feel them rather than think them. And that's what we mean. And the vast majority of the things you decide in any given day are in that level. You don't think about them. You probably didn't spend a lot of time thinking about which sock to put on first. You just did the one you always do, whether you know it or not, and so on. And this is the way life is. Now, the thing is, there's a lot of things in life that we make decisions that way that we shouldn't. There's a lot of things that we should not just be instinctually or habitually doing. We should actually be very thoughtful about it. And part of the process of becoming a wise person is learning how to make decisions rather than just simply do something. Uh, you know, Sometimes we make decisions instinctually rather than making a decision. We just do something instinctually on really, really big and important things, things that really have huge consequence, and yet we still will just sort of feel our way through it. The reason is because it's easier, right? It's just easier. But the danger is it's not wiser, and so you can end up with a whole lot of trouble and heartache because of that. So the image here in the Proverbs, of course, is the gates. What are you going to let into your city? Well, you could just say, well, the city of my life. What am I going to allow in and out of my city? Well, I can just instinctually make decisions. That is, when the sun comes up, the gate opens, and everybody can come and go as they please. We don't check anything, or we can just actually be thoughtful and say, well, who are you coming into this city? What's your business here today? And we can actually be more thoughtful about that. And that's the idea here. Part of wisdom is learning to make decisions, especially on the biggest things. And it includes two ideas. And there's probably more we could say on it, but for today's purpose, two ideas. And then one is this idea of being deliberate in choice making. Now, you don't need to be deliberate in everything. You don't need to be deliberate in which sock to put on first. That's a habit that's fine. But learning and forcing yourself to be deliberate about something. And what deliberate means to deliberate, means to take time to think about it, to think about the options and decide. And there's a lot of things we really should spend more time thinking about than we do. There's a lot of forces in the world that will draw you into making non-deliberate choices. Like, for instance, a lot of salesmen don't want you to think, so they'll put a time limit on something. Oh, you want to take advantage of this deal, you got to do it within the next 20 minutes or you'll lose it. And what they're trying to do there is they're trying to draw on that instinctual place of, I don't want to lose something, so that you don't deliberate and that you just act. What you want to do is you want to slow everything down and go, well, I'd rather lose the deal and stand in a safer place, a better place, than to just be rushed into something without thinking. Whether it be sales or whether it be other things, which school you're going to go to get your training, or who you're going to marry. It's amazing how little thought some people put into those big questions. But we need to learn to be more deliberate, and that our choices are more intentional, so that we actually are choosing rather than just stumbling along. The other side of making decisions is being decisive. And I know that almost sounds like it's repetitive, but the idea here is that make a decision and make it, like, do it. And what happens sometimes with people is that they don't really fully commit to a decision. They just sort of make a decision and then they feel annoyed with themselves, or they don't like where it's going, so they kind of pull back out of it. We use terms like waffling or being indecisive or being unstable and so on. And it's when we can't commit to a decision and then follow through on a decision. We could talk a lot about why that happens, anxieties people have, or the desire to have two outcomes, and so on and so forth. But we often do this. We have different reasons why, but we often fail to actually commit to a decision. And so it just leaves our life in a very unsafe and unstable place. But really good decision making is deliberate. I thought about it and chose, and then it's decisive. And I followed through on it. I did it. This is the choice, and I'm doing it. And those two things together, if you can learn to do them both and really master being those two things, you will make better decisions in life. You'll make better decisions on an efficiency level, but you'll also make better moral decisions, which is the wisdom Proverbs is talking about. And so it's really important to learn those things. So here's the I hope the encouraging part of this is that you got to realize that these don't come naturally. Some people are more predisposed to this. Some people are sort of wired better at being decisive or wired better at being deliberate, but they don't just naturally come by that. Even if they are predisposed to it, they still have to learn it. And so that's a good thing, because that means that everybody, whether or not you're sort of wired that way or not, you can learn it. You can learn to be more deliberate, and you can learn to be more decisive. But it just takes being cognitive of that fact, thinking about it, and going, okay, taking stock of yourself and saying, do I make decisions that are well thought out, and then am I able to commit to that decision and follow through? Um, and then you learn, and you can say, well, no, I don't do that very well. Well, that's a good step in learning. And then you decide, I'm going to start to learn. To go back to our verse, wisdom is calling to you, right? God has designed all humans with an ear for wisdom. And so wisdom is calling to you, saying, be more deliberate, be more decisive. And if you listen and learn it, you can learn that. And of course, Proverbs is going to teach that. When we get into chapter 10 and beyond, all the proverbial statements, there's all kinds of things God has given us to help us be more deliberate and be more decisive in our decision-making process. And so it is something you can learn. Even if you're a person who say, I'm just a free spirit. Well, you might be, but you don't have to be. You can learn wisdom, and you can grow in your ability to be deliberate and in your ability to be decisive. Anyway, that's enough of that for today. I hope that's useful to you. God willing, we'll be back tomorrow with verse 4. And in the meantime, give it some thought today. Maybe take a little stock of your decision-making process and see if there actually is a process, or if you're just feeling your way in life. And then I would encourage you out of that just to talk to the Lord about it, about how you can improve and become wiser. At any rate, God bless you. Have a great day.